My wife came toward me at the company dinner, a nervous smile on her face, her eyes asking for a normality that no longer existed. The room was full, co-workers were toasting the year's success, wine glasses were clinking, laughter echoed, but for me, everything was silent. The only sound I heard was my own breathing, heavy, uneven, full of anger and humiliation. When she got close enough to touch me, a light touch on my arm, I recoiled as if her skin burned, pushed her away, feeling repulsed. Her eyes widened, not just because of the sudden gesture, but because of the coldness in my voice when I blurted out the words that had been boiling inside me for hours. "You are a traitor, I know everything, I want a divorce right now." The shock on her face was almost comical, as if she expected her ridiculous theater to keep going, as if the world wasn't falling apart around us. The murmur in the room was instantaneous. People stopped talking, curious looks turned to us, some surreptitiously, others openly. She blinked a few times, searching for an answer, perhaps a convenient excuse, perhaps a desperate denial. But there was no way out for her. Not this time. Pain burned inside me, and every second, it was as if a new blow was being struck against my chest. I trusted her. I trusted blindly, stupidly, like a man who believes in the solidity of his house without realizing that the foundations had been rotten for a long time. There were years of complicity, promises, dreams built together. And she destroyed everything. Why? On a whim? By desire? Out of boredom? What made her sleep with another man while I went out every day to build a future for both of us? "No, you're wrong, love, please, let's talk." Her voice was low, brittle, as if she were really desperate to convince me. "But the farce is over." I laughed. A bitter, dry laugh, full of disgust. "Talk. Now you want to talk. Where was that desire when you were sleeping with him?" His name was on the tip of my tongue, ready to be spat out in the middle of that party, ready to be etched in the air like a scar. But I held back. I wouldn't give her that advantage. What killed me wasn't just betrayal. It was the way I was deceived. The way she came home all those nights, lay next to me, smiled, pretended it was still us. How could you be so cold? How could you look into my eyes, say you loved me and, at the same time, give yourself to another man? I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything around me. But most of all, I wanted her to feel the same pain that was consuming me now. The looks around us burned us. Murmurs filled the air. I saw people's expressions, some shocked, others filled with sick curiosity. Maybe they were wondering how long this had been going on. Maybe they were trying to remember suspicious moments, looks exchanged, lame excuses. Maybe some there already knew. She swallowed hard, her eyes watering, but not from the pain of guilt. It was fear. Fear of what would happen now. Fear of what would come later. Fear of losing everything. "Let's go home," she insisted, softly, leaning closer to me, as if she could fix everything with a touch, as if she still had some control over the situation. I pushed her hand away again. "Home." I spat the word out as if it were poison. "Do you still think there isn't us?" My voice came out firm, unwavering. "Your time is up." I left without looking back, leaving her alone, surrounded by looks that undressed her, that judged her, that condemned her as much as I had already condemned. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands were shaking. I needed to get out of that place. I needed air. As I walked through the parking lot, memories hit me. I remembered the first time I saw her. Of the years we spent together. Of all the broken promises. The way I loved her. Because yes, I loved her. Until that moment, until that very moment, I still loved her. But love wasn't enough to erase the pain. And then came the question that gnawed at me inside: why didn't I realize it sooner? Why didn't I see the signs? Or maybe I saw it. Maybe, somewhere inside me, I always knew. But I refused to believe it. Because believing meant accepting that the woman I loved never existed. And this was something I wasn't ready to face yet. Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal is never romanticized. Our stories are fictional, but the pain, disappointment and consequences are real. The goal? Show how betrayal can destroy lives, trust and families. Get ready, because what you're going to hear now is intense, shocking and unforgettable. Take a deep breath, the story is about to begin. Soft music played in the background as guests chatted, laughed and toasted the success of another year at the company. The atmosphere was refined, decorated with golden tones and yellowish lights that gave the room a sophisticated and cozy air. The sound of cutlery against plates mixed with voices and the light clink of wine glasses, creating an engaging melody of celebration and relaxation. In the middle of the crowd, sitting at the main table, were Daniel and Emily. They were a couple who, at first glance, seemed perfect. Married for 9 years, they have built a stable and comfortable life, based on years of partnership, complicity and mutual respect. At least that's what it seemed. He is a man dedicated to his work, meticulous in every detail of his professional and personal life, always seeking the best for his family. She, charming and engaging, had a magnetic aura that made people gravitate towards her. The two were always seen as the ideal couple, the type of relationship that everyone admired and, silently, envied. Emily wore a red silk dress that slid perfectly over her curves, her well-groomed hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and a delicate perfume spread around her every time she moved. Her smile was charming, captivating, and her eyes shone under the light of the room, transmitting the same vivacity that always accompanied her. Daniel, at his side, wore an impeccable suit, a firm posture and an attentive gaze. He observed the environment around him, greeted colleagues and superiors, and kept a firm hand on his wife's leg, an automatic gesture of possession and affection. Over the years, they had built a relationship based on balance, each playing their role within the marriage, but something, lately, seemed different. Emily was more distant, more distracted. His eyes roamed the room in an almost restless manner, and his smile, although charming, seemed rehearsed, without its usual naturalness. Daniel had noticed these subtle changes for weeks, but refused to give voice to the suspicions that were beginning to grow within him. He preferred to believe that it was just the stress of the end of the year, the accumulated tiredness of so many responsibilities. Dinner continued its course. Cups were refilled, laughter echoed, and toasts were made in the name of the company's success. Daniel tried to focus on the conversation, but his mind wandered. He was always a man of habit, meticulous and detail-oriented. He liked predictability, the comfort of knowing exactly what to expect in each situation, but lately, he felt like something was slipping through his fingers. Small delays, messages answered with a mysterious smile, phone calls answered away from your presence. He wanted to ignore these details, he wanted to continue being the confident and calm husband he always was, but his intuition told him that something was wrong. He took a deep breath and squeezed Emily's hand, seeking her attention. She turned to him with that charming smile, but there was a slight delay in her response, a small gap of time between the touch and the look that hadn't existed before. The last few months had been busy. Daniel had spent more time than he would have liked at work, putting in extra hours to secure a promotion that had finally arrived. He did everything for them, for her, for the future they planned together. I dreamed of a bigger house, unforgettable trips, moments of tranquility that always seemed to be postponed in the name of responsibilities that never ended. Emily always supported him, always smiled and assured him that everything would be okay. But was it really? Deep down, he felt that something inside her had changed. Maybe it was time, the natural wear and tear that any marriage suffers over the years. Maybe it was just his mind playing tricks on him. Emily, for her part, seemed to divide her attention between dinner and something else. His gaze wandered, his hands rested gently on the table, but with a slight tremor that only someone very attentive would notice. There was a weight in his chest, something he couldn't name, but it was there, firm, pressing. She looked at Daniel and felt a mixture of feelings that she didn't know how to process. He has always been an exemplary, loving, dedicated husband. He always did everything for her, and yet, there was something inside her that made her feel restless, as if she were trapped in a gilded cage. Dinner followed its rhythm. Boss speech, toasts, applause. Everything seemed to follow the expected script, but inside Daniel, something was stirring. It was in discomfort he couldn't define, a feeling that he was about to see something that would change everything. He looked around, trying to catch any unusual details. Time seemed to pass more slowly. Every small gesture, every exchange of glances around the room gained a different weight. The music, once pleasant, now seemed like just distant background noise, muffled by the tension building within him. Emily was restless, and he knew it wasn't just his imagination. So, he decided to observe. Just observe. It was at that moment that he noticed her gaze shift to the other side of the room, for a second longer than it should have been. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Daniel was an observant man. And there, in that small instant, something inside him began to crumble. The air around them seemed heavier, the conversations, once so lively, now seemed like distant noises. Emily took a deep breath and smiled, like she always did. But that smile, it wasn't the same. And then, without him being able to help it, the doubt became something more. It became certainty. But certainties sometimes come like a punch in the gut, and Daniel wasn't yet ready to face the truth that was hiding behind his wife's eyes. Dinner seemed to have lasted forever. Daniel felt the weight of each second dragging by as he watched Emily more closely than ever. Something inside him kept him restless, a nagging feeling that he was about to discover something that would change his life forever. He tried to divert his attention, to focus on the colleagues who came to congratulate him on his promotion, but his mind was fixed on her. In the subtle gestures, in the averted glances, in the breath that seemed to catch in his throat. Emily smiled, talked, touched acquaintances' arms with familiarity, but Daniel knew his wife well enough to notice that her mind was elsewhere. Or worse, someone else. The wine flowed through the glasses and the night progressed. The CEO's speech was made, applause filled the hall and the atmosphere became more relaxed. Some people were already leaving their chairs and moving to the bar, where the music was a little livelier and the conversations were looser. Emily got up too, claiming she needed to go to the bathroom. Daniel nodded, following her with his gaze as she walked. But then, he realized something. A tiny but significant detail. As soon as she walked away, she took her cell phone out of her bag and quickly typed something. It wasn't a suspicious action per se, but something about the way her fingers flew over the screen bothered him. He knew that kind of anxiety. I'd seen her before. But why would she be anxious? Why did she seem so focused? He felt a weight in his chest, as if he were about to take a step that he could no longer undo. His heart sped up uncomfortably. A part of him wanted to just ignore everything, wallow in the illusion that nothing was wrong. But the other part, the one that had already caught all the signals, demanded answers. And that was the part that won. He waited a few minutes and, with measured steps, got up, walking slowly in the same direction Emily had gone. The bathroom corridor was quieter, away from the hustle and bustle of the main hall. But it was before he even reached the door that he saw her. Standing at the end of the hallway, partially hidden by the half-light, was Emily, holding her cell phone to her ear, her voice low and quick. Her face was turned away, but the tension in her body was visible. Daniel stopped, watching from a distance, his breath caught. Yes. I know, me too, but not now. Her voice was almost a whisper, but it carried an urgency that Daniel had never heard before. He felt a shiver run down his spine. Where are you waiting for me? She paused, listening to the answer on the other end of the line. Okay, I'll find a way, just wait for me. Daniel's fingers curled into fists. His mind was spinning, trying to rationalize what he was hearing, but the truth was obvious. She was going out to meet someone. During the company dinner. During your promotion celebration. During the night it should be about them. He didn't move as Emily hung up the call and looked around, as if checking to see if she was alone. Her eyes sparkled for a second, and then, with one agile movement, she put away her cell phone, straightened her dress, and started walking back. But Daniel was no longer there. The blood boiled in his veins. He felt the betrayal taking deep root, squeezing his chest in a suffocating way. He could confront her right there, could meet her gaze and demand an explanation. But no. He wanted proof. He wanted to see how far it would go. His pride screamed for justice, and his heart just wanted to understand how all this had become possible. He returned to the lounge before her, sat down again, taking a long sip of his drink to mask the tremor in his hands. When Emily returned, smiling as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just arranged a secret meeting in the middle of the party, Daniel stood his ground. He didn't show anything. And perhaps that was what hurt him the most. She made a casual comment about needing some air, maybe taking a walk outside. He just nodded, watching as she picked up her bag and left with calculatedly calm steps. But he knew. He knew exactly where she was going. He waited a few seconds before discreetly getting up and following her. His heart was pounding hard in his chest, but his mind was cold, calculating. He wanted to see her with his own eyes. I wanted the truth to be exposed, without room for doubt. Emily exited the side of the building, and Daniel remained hidden in the shadows. He felt the cold wind against his face, but his skin burned. He watched as she stopped on the sidewalk and looked around, as if looking for someone. And then, he appeared. A tall man, wearing a dark blazer, well-groomed hair and a confident smile on his face. Emily smiled when she saw him, a smile Daniel hadn't seen in a long time. A smile full of life, of desire. And then, without hesitation, she stepped forward and hugged him. Daniel felt the world around him fall apart. It was like a physical blow, a cutting pain that hit him hard. He wanted to run to them, he wanted to rip her out of that man's arms, he wanted to scream, break, explode. But he didn't do anything. He stood there, still, just feeling the betrayal lodge in every fiber of his being. Emily cupped the man's face affectionately, as if this were the most anticipated moment of the day. Daniel felt his stomach turn. He had just lost everything, and she had no idea he was there, seeing every detail of his mistake. He didn't know how long he stayed there, watching. He just felt when the anger finally won. When his breathing became so heavy that he could no longer contain himself. Then he stepped forward, stepped out of the shadows, and called his name. Emily froze. The man next to him looked at Daniel with surprise, but without guilt, without shame. As if all that was normal. As if the betrayed man was just an insignificant detail in that scenario. And it was at that moment that Daniel knew. There was no going back. He was no longer the same man as before. The marriage he believed to be solid no longer existed. And Emily. Emily had already lost him before she even knew it. The silence that fell between them seemed infinite. Emily froze when she saw Daniel there, her expression alternating between terror and disbelief. The man next to her just crossed his arms, his gaze calm, almost disdainful, as if none of this was a surprise to him. But for Daniel, every second that dragged on was a blow to the chest, a new layer of pain that suffocated him inside. He didn't know if he felt hatred, if he felt disgust, or if he just wanted to understand how someone could destroy everything they built so coldly. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. He tried to take a step forward, but hesitated, as if he were stepping on broken glass. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the heavy, dense air. The bitter taste of betrayal was still in his mouth, but now there was something more. An uncontrollable need to understand. He had seen enough, he already knew about the infidelity. But something was missing. The reason was missing. And that why was what would keep him standing. The low laugh of the man next to Emily echoed between them, cutting through the silence. He looked at Daniel with a smirk, as if he found the situation amusing. As if it was all just a game for him. And that detail, more than anything, made Daniel's blood boil. He felt the anger rising, building within him, but he forced himself to remain still. Losing control now would mean giving them power they didn't deserve. Emily finally broke the silence. His voice was shaky but forced, as if he were trying to maintain a calm that no longer existed. Daniel, it's not what it seems, please, listen to me. He laughed, a dry, bitter laugh, full of everything that was accumulating inside him. Isn't it what it seems? His voice was lower than expected, but full of irony. He took a step forward, narrowing his eyes. So explain it to me, Emily. Because from here, it looks exactly like what it is. You lying, you cheating on me, you throwing away everything we built. She swallowed hard, her eyes watering, as if now, suddenly, guilt had caught up with her. I can explain. But he raised his hand, cutting off her sentence mid-sentence. No, you can't. But I want to hear it anyway. I want to know how far your ability to lie goes. The man next to her crossed his arms, his smile still present, as if he was enjoying this. And then, finally, he spoke. His voice was low, calm, almost casual. Were you always this naive, Daniel? Or were you just turning a blind eye? Daniel's heart jumped in his chest. He turned his gaze to the man, his hands balling into fists. Who the hell do you think you are? The other smiled sideways and looked at Emily, as if silently asking for permission to continue. And then, he said something that made Daniel's world fall apart for good. I'm the man Emily has loved for years. The man who stood by her while you thought you had a perfect marriage. I'm the guy she chose but never had the courage to come out to. Until now. The silence that followed was deafening. The ground seemed to disappear beneath Daniel's feet. He felt his breathing hitch, his chest tighten, the world around him lose focus. Emily lowered her head, tears finally streaming down her face. But he didn't feel sorry. He felt nothing but an immense emptiness taking over everything inside him. Since when? His voice came out hoarse, like he was scratching inside. Emily hesitated, but the man beside her smiled, pleased with the pain he was causing. 5 years. 5 years. Daniel felt the impact of those words like a punch to the stomach. 5 years. 5 damn years living a lie. 5 years of sleeping next to her, making plans, believing everything was fine. 5 years of being lied to, being treated like a fool. Every memory from the past crashed down on him at once. Every moment of affection, every kiss, every hug, all contaminated by the brutal truth that was now revealed. He turned to Emily, and now his gaze was pure ice. You let me build a future with you, knowing this was all a sham? Did you have the courage to renew vows, to say you loved me, while you slept with another man behind my back? Emily was crying, but Daniel didn't see the sincerity in her tears. She had cried for him before. She had smiled, hugged him, sworn her love, and none of that meant anything now. Daniel, I didn't want it to be like this. I tried to break up with him, I tried to move on with you, but she stopped. Because there was no possible justification. Because anything he said would only make everything worse. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the frustration burning inside. The air around him felt heavier, difficult to breathe. He looked at the other man, who was still there, watching everything as if he were a mere spectator. And you? What do you want now? To humiliate me a little more? To say that you always knew this would happen? The man shrugged. I just wanted you to know. I don't like leaving things unfinished. Daniel felt his body shake. Every fiber inside him cried out for action, for a scream, for a punch, for anything that would ease the pain he felt. But he wouldn't do that. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. He took a deep breath, swallowing all the anger, all the disappointment. He looked at Emily one last time. You lost me, Emily. Forever. And then, he turned his back. He walked away, without looking back. His chest was heavy, his mind was spinning, but he knew that this was the last time he would see Emily as his wife. He didn't know what he would do next, he didn't know where he would go, but he knew that this was the end of everything he once believed to be real. And the beginning of something he still couldn't define. The night seemed endless. The cold wind cut into Daniel's skin as he walked aimlessly through the almost deserted streets. His steps were heavy, but his mind was even more so. Everything inside him pulsed between anger and despair, between disbelief and the painful realization of reality. Every image of the betrayal came back in uncontrollable flashes: Emily's guilty look, that man's arrogant smile, the coldness with which the truth was thrown at him as if it were just a detail. 5 years. 5 years living a lie. He wanted to rip it out of himself, he wanted to scream until his throat ripped, he wanted to erase every moment shared, every memory, every promise made and broken without the slightest consideration. But he couldn't. Because it was real. Because it was his life falling apart before his eyes, and nothing he did would change that. The streets were calm, in contrast to the turmoil within. The footsteps echoed on the wet floor, and he wondered if it was possible to continue after that. Not just continue as if nothing had happened, because that was impossible, but move forward without carrying the weight of that betrayal in every look, in every touch, in every new relationship I could have. How do you get back up after being destroyed like that? How to trust again? How can you not become the bitter man you always criticized, the one who sees distrust growing in every corner, who never completely believes again? He didn't want to be that man. But how to avoid it? How could I not carry the scars of everything that had just happened? The anger returned with full force. That man's face remained clear in his mind, the tone of voice disdainful, the expression satisfied as if he had won some silent dispute. But it wasn't a game. It never was. At least for him. For Daniel, that was love, that was commitment, that was a whole life planned. For Emily, it was something that never stopped being temporary. A convenient illusion, a facade to hide what he really wanted. And the worst of all, she never had the courage to end it. She never had the decency to be honest, to say that she no longer felt anything, that she had chosen another path. No. She kept him there, trapped in a dead marriage, while enjoying the freedom of being two people at once. He felt the bitter taste of humiliation rise in his throat. He felt like an idiot. A fool who didn't see the signs, who held on to a lie with all his might as it shattered before him. He didn't know how long he walked until he got home. The silence in the apartment seemed more cruel than any words spoken that night. The familiar smell, the furniture carefully chosen by both of them, the photos spread out in two perfect frames. Everything there screamed that it had once been a home. But now, it was nothing more than a scenario of something that never really existed. He couldn't bear to stay there for more than a few seconds. He took the car keys and left again, driving aimlessly, without a fixed destination, just trying to escape everything that suffocated him. It was then that he stopped at a random bar, one of those he had never been to, where no one knew him and where he could be just another man lost in his own pain. He ordered a strong drink, feeling the liquid burn his throat, but not enough to erase what he felt. The world around them seemed like a blur, conversations jumbled together, laughter that didn't make sense, music that seemed too far away. He wanted to turn everything off. Just for one night. Just to breathe without feeling the weight of that betrayal crushing your chest. And it was there, between one sip and another, that something unexpected happened. A soft but firm voice caught his attention. An attentive, curious look, but without invasion. A woman sitting on the next bench, who seemed to see him without judging, without questioning, just noticing his existence without the need for immediate responses. It wasn't mercy. It wasn't empty curiosity. It was something different. Something he couldn't name at that moment. She didn't ask why he was there, didn't try to force a conversation. He just offered his presence, as if he knew that sometimes that was all someone needed. And maybe it was. Perhaps, at that moment, what Daniel needed most was not answers, nor justifications, nor even a plan to move forward. Just a moment away from the pain. Just a look that didn't see him as the betrayed man, but as someone who still had something inside him beyond ruin. He didn't know if he could trust again, if he would ever allow himself to feel something true again. But there, in that bar, in the midst of everything he had just lost, he realized that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way beyond the pain. The bar grew quieter as the night progressed. The low lights cast soft shadows on the faces of the few customers who still remained there, each immersed in their own solitude. Daniel held the glass between his fingers, watching the distorted reflection of the amber liquid in the dim lighting. He couldn't tell if he was more mentally or emotionally exhausted. He just felt like a part of him had been irreversibly broken. Every minute that passed seemed to carry with it the weight of what he had discovered, and he wondered how many days, months, or years it would take for that feeling to stop being so suffocating. The woman next to him was still there, without rushing, without pressure. She didn't force any interactions, and that made him feel strangely comfortable. Until, after long minutes of silence, she finally spoke, with a calm and firm voice. "It seems like the world dealt you a blow today." Daniel looked up, surprised by the direct statement. Her expression didn't show pity, nor that look full of forced compassion that he hated so much. It was just an acknowledgement, as if she knew exactly what he felt, without needing details. "Maybe it was more than a blow," he replied, his voice thick, as if each word cost effort. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying him for a moment before responding. "Whatever it was, it looks like you still haven't decided whether you're going to get up or stay down." Daniel let out a small, humorless laugh, shaking his head. "I don't even know if I have a choice. Maybe I should stay right there, where everything fell apart." The woman swirled her glass slowly, thoughtfully. "Everyone has a choice. The question is whether you will let the pain decide for you or whether you will decide despite it." Those words hit him in a way he didn't expect. He didn't want to be defined by betrayal, didn't want to be reduced to the role of the man who was deceived. But at that moment, that's exactly what I felt like. Every thought, every memory, every beat of her heart seemed to exist only within the shadow of what Emily had done. He didn't want it to be like this. But how to free yourself from it? The silence stretched again, and he realized he was allowing himself to think, instead of just feeling. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. And then, as if he had just realized something important, he turned to the woman beside him and asked, "Why are you talking to me?" She raised an eyebrow, a faint smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Because I've been where you are now. And I know that no matter how many people are around you, the loneliness of betrayal is a special kind of isolation." Daniel held his breath for a moment, absorbing what she had just said. He didn't ask for details. He didn't want to turn her into a mirror of his own pain. But knowing that someone understood, that this wasn't just something he carried alone, somehow made the night a little less suffocating. Time passed strangely after that. They talked about trivial things, about nothing that really mattered, but somehow mattered enough to keep him there, away from the storm in his mind. Her voice was calm, unhurried, and he found himself relaxing for the first time in hours. It was only when he looked at the clock that he realized it was already past 3 in the morning. He took a deep breath, as if he needed to gather the strength to face reality again. "I need to go," he said, his voice a little firmer now. She nodded, not looking surprised. "I know." He hesitated for a moment, as if there was something more he wanted to say, but the words escaped him. She didn't ask his name, nor did she offer hers. It was as if they understood that this meeting needed nothing more than what had already been said. He got up and, as he took the first steps towards the exit, he felt something different. The pain was still there, still burning like a fire burning his insides, but now there was something more. A tiny spark of possibility. Not of forgetfulness, nor of instant overcoming, but of something new. Something that he still didn't know how to name, but that made him realize that the end of something didn't always mean that everything was lost. When he left the bar, the morning was cold and silent. The world was still spinning, indifferent to what had happened to him that night. And for the first time, Daniel realized that no matter what Emily had done, no matter the betrayal, he was still there. It still existed. And somehow, that meant that, at some point, in some way, he would live again. Time passed, but the scars remained. Daniel moved on, or at least tried to. The divorce was inevitable and happened quickly and coldly. Emily tried to argue, tried to negotiate, tried to find any trace of the man who once loved her to gain an advantage, but all she found was an insurmountable wall. He had nothing left to offer her. Neither hatred, nor resentment, nor desire for revenge. Just indifference. And that indifference destroyed her more than any scream, more than any accusation. Because in the end, the worst punishment someone can receive is not anger at the person who betrayed them, but the complete lack of importance. She continued her life with the man she left Daniel for, but it didn't take long for her to realize that what seemed like love was nothing more than a vanity game. The burning passion that consumed her in secret meetings quickly turned into monotony when there were no more barriers, no more risks, no more adrenaline. Now, it was just reality, naked and raw. And this reality was accompanied by problems that previously seemed invisible. Jealousy, insecurity, distrust. Because whoever cheats once knows that they can be cheated on too. She began to notice the signs, hidden messages, unexpected exits, poorly explained excuses. And then, the inevitable happened. He caught him with another one. But it wasn't a surprise. Deep down, I already knew. And that time, there was no home to return to. There was no husband willing to forgive her. She became what Daniel once was, the person who was deceived, the one who believed too much, the one who bet everything and lost. But the difference is that, for her, there was no redemption. Meanwhile, Daniel was rebuilding his life. The process was neither quick nor easy. Some nights were still too long, too lonely, filled with memories he didn't want to revisit. But, little by little, he learned to fill the gaps with things that really mattered. He rediscovered pleasures he had forgotten, allowed himself to live without the shadow of betrayal dictating his every step. And then, when he least expected it, he found someone who didn't try to patch up his wounds, but who simply accepted that they existed. The woman he met that night at the bar wasn't an instant love, nor a fairy tale that erased everything that happened. But it was real. It was a fresh start. And in the end, that was enough. The man who destroyed his marriage followed his own path, but fate has a cruel way of teaching lessons. He thought he had won, that he had achieved everything he wanted, but in the end he realized that some achievements come with a very high price. When Emily caught him with someone else, her reaction was boredom, as if that moment was just an inevitable consequence. He was already bored, he was already looking for something new. She was no longer an adventure, no longer a mystery to be solved. And, when she realized that she was being discarded in the same way she discarded Daniel, she finally understood the weight of the choices she made. But it was already too late for regrets. Life followed its course, and each person reaped exactly what they sowed. For Daniel, what came next was a new path, away from the pain that once almost destroyed him. For Emily, just the emptiness of having lost everything for something that never had value. And for the one who thought he would always have control, all that was left was the certainty that, in the end, he never really had anything. And now, I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Leave your comment and share your opinion. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, take the opportunity to subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. Remember, betrayal is never romanticized here, and and what we show is how it can destroy lives, trust and relationships. Thanks for following through to the end. See you next time.